Evening, friends. Josh here with Inkology, and I'm excited. Today is the first day of the rest of my life. No. But on a better note, it is the day that I'm going to begin writing my comic book. I think the first one I'm going to be sending off to Image Comics to get made. Yesterday, you can follow my live stream, listen to kind of the concept of it, what I was looking for. And I think I settled on one that I kind of didn't want to give up and kind of let any other publishing company have. But I'm just going to have to do it. I'm just going to have to do it because it's such a good story. And got to let things go a little bit, as someone said earlier. But if you're just joining me, so I do ink artwork, and I do do comic work. I do art pieces of all kinds, digital, 3D, pencil, pen, paintings, murals. The only thing I don't do, which I will get into, is marble sculpting, which I just met a fantastic marble sculptor who learned her trade from the greats in Rome, and it's a classical way. So I'm excited to befriend her more and learn that art craft. It's an expensive one, but man, oh man, what a skill set to have. But I'll stick to the pen and ink for now, as I'm a classical artist by trade. And what we're doing today is, like I said, starting in the comic book process. So if you're interested in starting a comic book, this is where you would want to follow along and begin on day one. You can always go to the day before when I was doing the Wolverine drawing. But if you haven't already, please like and subscribe to my channel. This would help out me as an artist, as a creative, and, don't be shy. If you have a channel too in art on both Instagram or TikTok or YouTube, put your link below in the comments, and I would love to follow you back. Love to support my fellow creatives. So, I'm going to be eating some cheese, drinking some wine, and enjoying the evening. It's going to be about an hour and a half program. Not much drawing, so if you're looking forward to some art, not going to be much today. This is the process of research. Yeah? All right, let's begin, yo. All right, you're probably looking at my book. Let me get some gloves on so that way I don't get greasy cheese everywhere. Really fun. Side note, I was working on a Gundam piece, my first Gundam piece the other day, and I finally colored it. And I'm always afraid to color my stuff because I'm terrible at coloring. But it was fantastic to see it colored in a retro vintage look. I posted it on the post today, so you can check it out on my YouTube post. Now, also working on the Wolverine, coloring that guy, but I don't know if that's going to turn out so well. Kind of made him too bulky and goofy looking. Anywho, I am, if you don't know who I am, I'm also a traveler and explorer. Like, I try to go to these countries, and I've been to Egypt, so we're looking at Egypt today. I've climbed the pyramid, this one right here. Let's just say, yeah, stuff happens. So why is all these things? Okay, I can't stand these ads on YouTube. So I've done things like climb to the tip top of this bad boy. They wouldn't let me on this one, mainly because the guards over here with the AKs were shooting me down. Obviously, people aren't really allowed to do that, but for research purposes, I was allowed to see some stuff. Travel throughout the Nile all the way down to, let's see, Edfu was probably the furthest down I went to. No, I went to Aswan. All the way from Aswan to Edfu area to Thebes, and just all the way up through it all. Let's see, where else have I gone? Anyways, we're going to research. And research is fun. Research is my favorite part of the beginning stages, and it should be your favorite. So if you're starting to create a comic book and you're like, where do I begin? Obviously, it's going to be research. Let me lower this music. Can't even speak over it. Sorry. research is where you're going to begin. So if you're starting out for, let's just use Wolverine for example, the writer would want to research adamantium, strongest metals, what a Wolverine's characteristics are at the animal, the kind of twitches and twerks that the animal does, aggressive men who may have, what's the most like aggressive looking guy figure, the teeth, the forms of the skeleton that would make someone who works out too much, and all these different things make up who Wolverine is. But then he also has a soft side to him, a dark past, and he has a brother, Sabretooth, and he has so much to his character that you should research. Or the person who created might not research; they might have just made this stuff up. But for the most part, if you were creating a character, you're going to research them. And today, we're going to be, I guess for the next month or so, we're going to be developing a character's name is Ehud, Ehud. Now, Ehud is I'm going to go through a lot of information, so I do apologize. I had to write all this down so I can figure this out. It's from the book of Judges, chapter 3, 12 through 30. Okay, so I have a couple Bibles here. Now, before you get all, weird about this, I was raised on this book. I was raised to memorize every scripture in this bad boy as a super religious Pentecostal kid, and, lived in this thing. Now, am I a religious person? No. Am I a Christian? No. I never claimed to be a Christian even when I went to the church. Now, there was a few times I might have been categorized as it, but I always consider myself a person who loves history, who loves the arts, and loves all religions and their weirdness to control humanity in a sense. So if you're religious and you feel like you're learning something new, that's awesome. I'm excited. But if you feel like I'm offending you and your religious beliefs, I do not mean to. I do not mean to offend anybody in this. I only want to speak the truth and give historical, archaeological, and logical facts about characters, people, history, and everything above, as well as try to create some decently accurate as I can be with what they wore, how their characters may have reacted to the language and all. But in order to do some of that, I will have to change it to adapt it to English or and be imaginative to keep it at least a part of my creative process and creative way of doing things. So please don't take any offense. This is a great learning experience for both you and I, because while I'm researching this, I'm also learning and revitalizing my mind. I don't know everything in this book. I really don't even know half of it, honestly. This is really cool if they show the building. Someone's already drawn this out, and I love that artists have created this. This is the stuff that I would like to create. And this is a lot of work. Someone had to go to the site and actually map this stuff out. And you can see here in the far corner, this is where it's mapped out by the actual feet and diameters and everything. As accurate as they can make it, because that's how much people love, history and culture. Now, this is an archaeological Bible. The book of Ezekiel. I'll be getting to that. But for today, let's start with Ehud. Now, the name Ehud is actually means united in Hebrew, I believe it is, if I'm correct. I'm thinking of there's a king called Eglon, King Eglon of the Moabites. We'll get to him in a second. Yeah, so the name Ehud means united, or the one who is united. It comes from the Hebrew word ichad. Ichad. My Hebrew is non-existent, so forgive me if I'm butchering it. Which means one or united. He's like a super significant figure in the Old Testament of Judges, in the book of Judges specifically, as he kind of does this amazing thing under their oppression, the Israelites' oppression, and he's like, if you guys have ever played the video game Assassin's Creed, to me he is the Assassin's Creed dude. Super sneaky, hidden blade, stabs the king, gets away with it all out the window kind of thing, and runs from the guards. So that's why I chose his story a little bit, because he has a really cool action scene, but he also represents a lot of different kind of promiscuous things in our culture and society that they want to talk about. There's a few reasons why I chose this story, and so you would know, I chose his story because A, you want to look for a story that sells, right? And if I'm going to be pitching this story to um, Image Comics or Boom or Top Cow, something like this, I need a very provocative story that's going to be something relatable to today's culture and something that people want to hear, and also something that also that isn't, I mean, something that's extremely violent and aggressive, but also something that's not so much so that it turns away those who are very religious and who kind of bow themselves to these stories, both Jewish and the Israelites and the Christians and all. Ehud has a little bit of a twist of like a promiscuous sexuality, almost to the point where it doesn't say he's gay, doesn't say he's a part of the that kind of community, but the Moabite king is kind of tricked into this physical relationship for a moment because he kind of wants it. He's a very gluttonous. King Eglon is just this heifer of a king. He's so overweight. He probably has his rolls rolling over his arms and his arms rolling over his chair, but he likes to be pleased in a very physical way. And he takes on this opportunity for Ehud to being alone in his room with him. He also goes takes a dump on the toilet, it seems like, and that could be his downfall too. But we'll get to all that in a moment. For now, I want to talk. Hey, TF, welcome. Talk about the research process. Now, I've researched this story lots and lots of times, and each time I research it, I find something new about it. But I want to go through today mainly about researching what the story is going to entail, what it's going to be about, and what I have to include in order to create something that's a 3 comic book published. 3 comics is what I want. I don't want it to be a 10 comic book series or anything. I want it just 3. Number 3 is good, but each comic, hopefully about 30 to 40 pages each one, leading to about a 100-page comic maybe. I don't know. We'll see how that goes. It all depends on how much I can extract from the story. But you're going to have a real-time, live development, full through, non-edited kind of thing through my live stream. So yeah, it's going to be fun. It's going to be, 3 volumes sounds pretty dope. I think there's always the arc of a story. You have the introduction, and then you have the cliffhanger, and then the middle one is going to be the build-up of what the threat really is, and maybe the other side of things, and then the final book is going to be, of course, the conclusion and the result of both sides going at it. Here we have the story of Ehud being a part of the Israelites and being somebody who is a left-handed guy. They don't even say he's much of a warrior or anything, but he's left-handed. The irony of being left-handed, a man from Benjamin, the son of a right hand, right? He's probably highlighting. It says it's probably talking about he was a very good warrior, right? Being able to wield a weapon with both hands, probably, because in most cultures, being left-handed was not a positive thing. It was actually frowned upon in many cultures, like Egypt and many of the Middle East. Like being left-handed was a discredit towards just the beliefs of the culture. Even today, you can walk around and most things are right-handed because that's what most people are. The Mesopotamian cultures like Sumer and Akkad and Babylon, left-handedness was sometimes associated with a negative omens and considered unlucky, right? And the rituals and practices of these cultures often emphasize my importance of you need to be right-handed over left-handed. Even the ancient Greeks and Roman cultures, it wasn't like totally condemned or anything like that, but it was viewed as kind of a suspicious, considered less desirable than a right-handed person. So for the Hebrews and the Jewish traditions, um, we can kind of see that this was an important thing to talk about, something different than the right hand, which was very normal, and many weapons were probably made for the right hand. Uh, Most of the suspected ways of attacking was from the right hand, but being left-handed would have been a complete surprise. So the story being him being a left-handed man, it's like Bible study without the tea and cookies and judgment. Yeah, yeah, I hope so. Maybe that's what this is. Being left-handed is like it's about being a surprise, and that's what Ehud's story is about: surprising the enemy. Um, King Eglon did not see it coming. Now, how did he hide his blade if he's in his robe or by his thigh? Possibly because being a right-handed person, you would pull from the left thigh or the right thigh, and it'd be very visible. But if you were able to sneak in on the other thigh, where they would be like, "Oh, well, he's obviously not too many people are right-handed, so we don't have to check that other one," he could use his left hand and use it swiftly to get in there. Now, part of the story is, how did he get it past Eglon, who is right in front of him? Well, King Eglon is considered, his name is pretty much heifer, like a big cow. So his stomach probably blocked the view of the rest of his body, of Ehud's body coming up at him, especially if he's laying in bed or if he's on the toilet or something like that, where we will find out later of how he died. But to the point, left-handedness means surprise, so the whole story will be about surprise. And that gives me a really good basis to create a great story arc. In each book, in each graphic novel or comic book, I get to create a surprise and keep the viewer being impressed by something new. Now, it's going to be hard for me to create, but you know what? History has a lot of surprises, and history is built for surprises. So I'm excited to reveal some history about the Egyptian culture, about the Hebrew culture, the tribe of Benjamin, and all these little facets of things, especially the weapons. I think we don't get to enjoy some of the swords and blades that were created back then. Let me see what I have. I have one from Egypt, and I got this from a side salesman. I think I got this in Luxor, Thebes, but I don't know. So this is a replica of an Egyptian blade, side blade, right? Now, I would imagine that the size of this would be good for our boy Ehud to have. You can see it's got a bronze wrapping. And in this time period, we're talking about a time period that is also about the 1300 BCE to 1100 BCE. So there's a lot of things that have happened at that time, but even before that. Like Egypt had already created most of its empire, and it's in its second kings of rulership by the Hyksos, and even in China you have the Shang dynasty. Oh man, I can't think of it. We'll get to that shortly, though. They had already been established around that time, and a lot of things were really coming to pieces, coming together in that time period. It wasn't the earliest, and there was a lot of things that happened way before that. I mean, you're talking about, which is kind of a funny thing, is that the Bible talks about the earth being created in like 7 days, which a lot of over-religious fundamentalists believe that 7,000 years, because they read the Bible and say, 1 day is to 1,000 years. We won't get into that. But the city of Jericho is actually 8,000 to 9,000 years old, and it's one of the earliest cities, fortified town cities ever built. In fact, the name Jericho means crumbling rubble, pretty much. That's what it was known for. It's just a rubble of rocks, but it's crumbling down from its walls. So when you hear the story of Jericho and Joshua taking over and them circling it and then banging pots and pans and trumpets and stuff like that, and the walls come tumbling down, it's a metaphor. It's an allegory. Gosh, my brain's are starting to not work again. Anyways, it's a story about the idea that Jericho is already kind of a crumbling city. It had crumbled multiple times and been taken over multiple times by by the point Joshua is coming into play. Now the book of Judges comes in after Joshua, and it's about when Israel doesn't have really a ruler or a king. So they have these guys, these heroes, men and women that are heroes that kind of do these amazing feats against their oppressors and get them to have, a few years of freedom and non-oppression, which is really cool. I think Samson created like an 80-year one. Yeah, no problem, TF. Go do what you do. Good to have you. And let's see, who else is there? I mean, here with Ehud, he gets an 18-year. Eglon was oppressing them for 18 years, and then Ehud comes in to save the day for a while. Okay, so as for the blade here, this gives me a good reference, and it's always good to take historical references and use them because they're just way cooler. We've got like this marble stone handle, and then bladed point. These two little holes here would be where you would wrap a rope around, and it would connect to your side or your hip. And then, of course, it's a little rusty. I haven't opened this in a while. And this is just a replica blade, so it's not blade, so it's not very sharp. I definitely could sharpen it, but it's a flimsy metal, real trashy. But it gives the idea of what it was like. That's why I bought it. I think it was like $10 or something in Egypt when I went. This was like more than 15 years ago, 20 years ago. Maybe 15 years ago. Anyways, cool blade. So you can imagine, I like to think that Ehud, had this in his side, and he comes out, and he's left-handed, sorry. He would have to come out and then jam it into the King Moab's inner stomach, and then when he yanked it out, dung came out. That's what the story says. Poop and dung, and it just kind of tells what the character of the Moabite king was like. He was someone who was just full of dookie. Now, let's get into a little bit of the story, and I'm going to read it out so you guys will know what I'm talking about. If you haven't read the Bible in this story, we'll get into it, and I'm going to read it straight from I have an apologetics Bible, but I'm going to use an archaeological one. It reads just fine. So, the death of Joshua. No, we're here. Where are we at? Ehud, right here. So, here we go. I'm going to do some storytelling, some reading. Welcome to Reading the Bible with Josh. All right, give me a second. Let me eat some cheese. I'm hungry. Oh, what's another cool thing is the Philistines. The Philistines, possibly the sea people, super epic culture, bad to the bone. If you like Game of Thrones, here you go, baby. This is the book. Judges is the book for you. I look at this as Game of Thrones all the way through. The book of Joshua all the way through Judges. Joshua was a beast. He was a military dude. He was pretty much a murderer, killer, destroyer of worlds kind of guy. And that's where I get my name from. I am Joshua, the destroyer of worlds. But all right, let's begin. This is Judges chapter 3, verse 12. Yep, Ehud. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel, because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He gathered to himself the Ammonites and the Amalekites, and went and defeated Israel. And they took possession of the city of palms. And the people of Israel served Eglon, the king of Moab, 18 years. Then, you know what? I should probably just zoom in for you guys. Voila, look at that. the mic over here. Where do we go? Then the people of Israel cried out to the Lord, and the Lord raised up for them a deliverer, Ehud, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite, a left-handed man. The people of Israel sent tribute by him to Eglon, the king of Moab. And Ehud made himself a sword with 2 edges, a cubit in length, and he bound it on his right thigh under his clothes. And he presented the tribute to Eglon, king of Moab. Now Eglon was a very fat man, and when Ehud had finished presenting the tribute, he sent away the people who carried the tribute. But he himself turned back at the idols near Gilgal and said, I have a secret message for you, O king. And he commanded silence. And all his attendants went out from his presence. And Ehud came to him, and he was sitting alone in his cool roof chamber. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. And he rose from his seat. And Ehud reached with his left hand and took the sword from his right thigh and thrust it into his belly. The hilt also went in after the blade, and the fat closed over the blade, for he did not pull the sword out of his belly, and the dung came out. Yuck. Then Ehud went out into the porch and closed the doors of the roof chamber behind him and locked them. When he had gone, the servants came, and then they saw that the doors of the roof chamber were locked, and they thought, surely he is relieving himself in his closet of the cool chamber. And they waited till they were embarrassed. But when he still did not open the doors of his roof chamber, they took the key and opened them, and there lay the Lord dead on the floor. Ehud escaped while they delayed, and he passed beyond the idols and escaped to Sirah. When he arrived, he sounded the trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. Then the people of Israel went down to him from the hill country, and he was their leader. And he said to them, follow after me, for the Lord has given your enemies to Moabites into your hands. So they went down after him and seized the fords of the Jordan against the Moabites, and did not allow anyone to pass over. And they killed at that time about 10,000 of the Moabites, all strong, able-bodied men. Not a man escaped. So Moab was subdued that day under the hand of Israel, and the land had rest for 80 years. All right. How is that? That in of itself to me is an epic story, because we don't just see this creative tale of whoever the writer is. Let's just presume, and I'm not saying this is a true story. I can't imagine it being, because we don't have any verifiable truth. But it was also, 1300 BC, so we don't have that evidence because it's probably destroyed more times over and over and over. So evidence is destroyed. But Jericho was mentioned. A lot of these places were mentioned. So there may be some small truths in a lot of these stories, which I like to imagine are truthful at the same time, but also keeping a reserve that this is a religious book attempting to create a narrative for the Israelites to dominate over anybody they want. Because when you read the Bible, there's 3 sections. You have the Old Testament, you have the New Testament, and then you have, which includes 2 parts, the Gospels and then the letters of Paul and letters, period, right, and Revelation and stuff. But the Gospels actually came after the letters of Paul. So there's some confusion. A lot of people read this and they go straight into the Gospels thinking, oh, right after all this comes Jesus and then Paul comes around. No, actually, Paul comes first, and then those people write about Jesus. So that's where you get a lot of contradictions and a lot of issues with writings, because each gospel is kind of a different sect of the religion of Christianity. Because when Christianity first started off, back when Jesus died, Oh man, it wasn't like one Christianity. It wasn't Orthodox or anything. It was a bunch of different Christianities because so many different people who were uneducated took it and made their own version of what it meant to be a follower of Christ, which got out of hand. And that's why Paul was like, nah, 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 you got to do this stuff anyways. Let's go back to Old Testament. Old Testament, you can take away from the, the New Testament altogether. And that's why you have the Jews who don't even pretty much acknowledge the New Testament and Jesus and all this stuff. Maybe as a prophet, but nothing more than that. Not the son and the king kind of God, not the son of God or not God. So when we have this Old Testament stuff, we have a really good look into the Israelite Jewish culture of wanting to create stories for them to be the reason why they were able to kill and take over lands and all this kind of stuff, which a lot of cultures all do. I mean, even America does that today. We rewrote the history books to make it look like we found America and how wonderful it's an amazing country because of Columbus. We celebrate the holidays of Columbus, but Columbus was a vicious, ridiculously crazy slave-holding racist, and he dominated so much of America and killed so many. I mean, he entirely wiped out races almost in the Haiti area, and terrible. And we celebrate him because the narrative got changed. We want to create our own narratives as a culture, and in Spain and all these other countries wanted to create that. In America also right now, they're killing Native Americans and indigenous people left and right and not telling any of us about it. We're still worried about culture issues like, if Trump or Biden is going to be the next president kind of stuff, and all these other things, and wars in other countries, and plastics in the ocean. But we're totally overpassing the fact that America is just murdering the indigenous people and trying to wipe them out so they can have more land. Still to this day. Ain't that crazy? It's crazy. So go to a reservation or a community, talk to an indigenous person, ask them what's really going on, and your mind will explode. Even research the residential schools. That'll blow your mind. Oof, that's a tough one. Anyways, cultures do that. I don't expect these books to be any different. But what I'm going to do is pretend that they are 100%, not 100%, but very accurate to what their stories are, and I'm going to recreate them for a comic book. But this does not mean I am a fundamentalist, a religious person. Okay? Don't get that confused. I don't need that. I don't need that controversy in my life. You know what I mean? So look. So I want to talk about something that's rad here. So we just got into the book of Judges, and the story of Ehud. And this is how you're going to start researching. Now that I've read you the story of it, and this is, let's say you don't have a story at all, and you're starting a comic book. That's no good. You know what I mean? That's not where you want to begin. You want to have some idea, and if that idea is even a revenge, the word revenge, salvation, or let's say humor, you want to start with something, but make sure it's something that you want to tell, a story you want to tell. Usually we're afraid to tell a story because we're like, oh, it's already been done. I'm not that good of a writer. I'm not that good of a drawer, artist, or whatever. I can't do it. Get all that stuff out of your way. Ignore all that nonsense. That's not going to help you, okay? Just ignore it. Any negativity towards your creative process will be not helpful. So ignore it. This is not made for anyone else. This is made for you. You're drawing a comic book. You're making a comic book for you. If you're making it for other people, you're already starting down a path that could fail you, because you could be, if no one picks it up and no one supports it, then you may not ever get to tell your story again, or maybe you'll stop yourself from doing it. So you need to be careful. You need to be smart about encouraging yourself and you being the main reason why you're doing this, because there's a story you want to tell. There's a story maybe even you want to tell your kids, or maybe your kids, or maybe someone else, maybe whatever, but it needs to be something that's detached from the direct community that you think you should be impressing or something. I'm creating this for 100 years down the road. I know that sounds crazy, but this book is super old, you know what I mean, the Bible. And there's a lot of books that are old that are enjoyable. And a lot of the old retro stuff I enjoy. And the people who created them are dead. You know, you even got Da Vinci, right? And you got a lot of artists, Van Gogh and stuff like that, who created things that weren't really appreciated in their time. Maybe some of it was, obviously Da Vinci was, but there's a lot that wasn't until it got stolen or he died or something like that. And then it became famous and then it became valuable and then it became studied and then become great art. Even though, honestly, I don't like Van Gogh's art, really. I don't think it's that great, but a lot of people love his art. I'm like, ugh. Not to say he's not talented, but it's not my stuff, right? So when you're creating a comic book, make sure it's for you more than anything. And then someone will love it. Someone will love it. There will be one person. If it's just that one person, they will find it and they will enjoy it. And that's enough. That should be enough. But it should really just be enough for yourself. And if I die and nobody likes any of my comics or any of my artwork, that's okay. I don't need them to be. I need myself to release this stuff from my mind onto paper. That's who I am. Or onto film. And I've learned to love that. And it's been the greatest relief to my life than trying to please human beings. Because human beings are the worst. So, I'm not going to be using music anymore. All these copyright issues on these things are going to kill my live stream. So, let's just stop that. I was using these things that say no copyright issues and stuff, but then there's a comment that says, you'll be flagged and it'll be taken down. I'm like, well, great. Hopefully this won't be flagged and taken down. I'll be very sad because then I have to remake it. All my stuff is live stream, so I don't know how that works. I'm not making any money off this anyway, so people get away with a lot more crazier things. Give me a millisecond. All right. Hope that sound wasn't really in the background. You can hear it too well. All right, let's get back to the thing. Research. Today, you have no excuse for being able to find information about your character or the history or weapons or anything like that for your comic book. You can literally Google anything or AI it. It will give you, ChatGPT will give you, just make sure if you do AI, to fact check everything, but at least it'll lay it out for you and it makes it much easier because Google doesn't always give it easy. You have to go into Reddit or Quora or something like that kind of research, and it's just annoying. But we go straight to the thing. Now here's something cool. This is how I'm researching. I know it took like 40 minutes to get into this position, but here we go. Reading it again. And the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, against Israel because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. Okay? That last part of that sentence we don't need, right? Because they had done what was evil in the sight of the Lord. They just literally said that right here. But you'll find that the Bible does that a lot. They just kind of over-repeat so they can emphasize that Israel is being little dickheads. Israel, I really don't understand why there's such a praise on Israel. Israel is a very vicious country, historically, when it comes to attacking and killing and murdering and pillaging and stuff like that. God kind of allows such things in the Old Testament. The God of the Old Testament is not the same God as the New Testament, Jesus Christ, what he talks about. I'm so sorry to crack your bubble if you believe that. I know that in churches they teach, oh, God is good all the time, and all the time God is good. He's the same God yesterday and today and forever. This is a theological perspective built in by pastors and a modern understanding of Christianity. It is not an accurate or biblical understanding, and I'm going to show it to you just in this one story, which is one of hundreds of stories that validate that the God of Yahweh, who predates the Jewish and Israelite tradition, to the 1200 BCE was when it really started. But Yahweh was actually archaeologically found to be the god of thunder and lightning, right? And then El, who's a different god, was merged into Yahweh, and it becomes Elohim, or El in full, and absorbed by El. And if you want to research that, please research. There's a lot of scholars out there that will give you better information for that. I am not a scholar. I am someone who just loves the history and loves learning about these things and can help you get on that path. Anyways, Ehud, and we can show that Ehud right here on the very first line. It says, the people of Israel again did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. So Israel is doing something evil, and this is supposed to be God's people. So God is allowing the oppressors to take down his own people, and we'll see this over and over in the Bible. He does this a lot. God makes mistakes. Okay, in the Old Testament, He created man, and then somehow He forgot that He allowed Satan into the garden, which was supposed to be a holy place, sacred place, and then He forgot that He had two trees to choose from, and He knew that man was going to choose the one of knowledge of good and evil versus the one of life. Like, okay. Either way, comes into the dilemma of if in which he is perfect, then he did intend for us to fail and sin, so that way he could teach us a better lesson over and over and over, eventually to the point of creating his son, who would eventually have to die because we're that pathetic of human beings. Very hard to explain. If you're religious, like I said, you're going to get offended probably. If you're a Christian, even more so. But let's just look at history and facts about the characteristics of this. And I do understand the theology behind it. I was raised in a Pentecostal and non-denominational understanding of the Bible. So I understand the preaching perspective you probably have been warped into believing if you're like me as a young man, or as a child I was. But when I read the Bible, and if you haven't read the Bible all the way through, read it all the way through, please. And don't just read this one. Read the ones the Catholics wrote and have in their Bible, and read the agnostic Gospels too while you're at it, because you need to have information of how history actually evolves and uses different scriptures and texts to build their religion. Right here it says Israel did again, another time. They've done this multiple times. Evil in the sight of the Lord, right? And the Lord strengthened Eglon, the king of Moab, right? He strengthened him. He gave power to a bad guy in the story against Israel. And then what did Eglon do? He's like, oh man, I'm going to go gather the Ammonites and the Amalekites. So this is really cool, because now we get to research what was Israel doing that was bad. That's a big part of this story. So when I'm creating this comic book, a good portion of it's going to be showing Israel committing these sinful things, these evil things, right? Because that has to build up the story. That's my first story arc. I'm sweating in here. Is that Israel's doing something bad, and whatever it is, I've got to visually show it and tell it. Enough so that another king of Moab is being strengthened by it. And they're like, oh, and he's got to be a big dude, or maybe he's not a big dude yet, Maybe he's a mediocrely strong, a militant dude, and then when he becomes king, becomes super fat and gluttonous and heifer-like. Which is very cool. That could be it. But we don't know that yet, right? So I have to research that. So showing Israel's evil in that time period, 1200 BC, somewhere around there. They're probably worshiping the god Baal, probably the god of let's see. Asherah and some other ones. Let me see. I have a list of some that I wrote down. Come on. Do. Mm-hmm. Ooh, I am sweating. Let me take off this hoodie. I don't know why I'm wearing a hoodie. All right. So we got Yahweh, right? God of Israel. Yahweh is a central deity that is the one true God kind of character, right? And that's what the Israelites are doing. Then you have Baal. Baal, Baal. He or she is obviously worshipped highly into the Near East, ancient Near East, and is a big conflict with Yahweh. Okay. Associated with fertility, storms, agriculture, different regions had their own variation of Baal, and the worship usually involved rituals that had bountiful harvests. And you'll find that a lot of gods are about harvest because back then there was no scientific understanding of how plants grew and harvest worked and the seasons and all that stuff. They were still worshiping the stars and planets and stuff like that they could hardly see. Now there was Asherah, the goddess, who was associated with fertility, motherhood, and nurturing the aspects of nature. Usually, worshipped alongside Baal. Okay, Baal, Asherah. And then there's Astarte, who was the goddess worshipped in that region, who was associated with love and sexuality and war, and sometimes was merged with Asherah and worshipped separately a little bit. That I need to research more on Astarte. And there was Dagon, like dragon, but Dagon, Dagon God, and this was a Near Eastern culture as well, including the Philistines. These are the Philistines' god Dagon, with associated with grain and fertility. So you already see a similarity with crops and fertility. Giving birth is a magical, amazing thing. The growth and birth of plants is an amazing thing. So we worship things that come anew that we can't explain. And then you got Molech, or Moloch. Okay, Moloch was associated with child sacrifice. This is not the cool one. This was a Canaanite god, and they usually sacrificed children to Moloch, bringing blessings and prosperity and all that stuff. So, no fun to worship Moloch, especially if you're a little kid. Is it me today? No. No fun. And that's just a few of them. That's just a few of the gods. And yeah, so in that time period, we know a few things, okay? There was the Egyptian New Kingdom, was a little bit before that. The pharaohs such as Ramses II reigning and building the constructions of the temples at Karnak and Luxor were being built. The Assyrian Empire, it was emerging, right? And it was huge coming into the Near East. A lot of us know the Assyrian Empire. They just kind of dominated all their little areas. And then you got the Bronze Age collapse, right? Towards the end of the period of Judges, the Bronze Age collapse happened, and then it was the decline of several major civilizations, like the Eastern Mediterranean, like the Hittites, the Mycenaeans, and others like that. The Phoenician civilization in that time period, city-states, right? Establishing colonies and Mediterranean lifestyles, maritime traders. These are the Phoenicians. And then you had the Iron Age coming through. This is important. Iron Age is important. And Iron Age is probably the most important because we're looking at iron. When we look at history, we need to dissect it in a few different ways. And one of the easiest ways for people to study history is to look at the development of metals. You have the Stone Age, Bronze Age, Iron Age, and man, my brain just farted. I don't know what the next one is, but I'm just going to go straight to the nuclear weapon age because we kind of developed fast after that. And these ages matter because the trick is whoever had the strongest weapon, the most advanced weapon, was reigning supreme as a culture, as a warrior, as a leader, as a king, as a kingdom. So when you have bronze is a very is bronze? I think bronze is copper and nickel merged together. Ah man, it's a softer metal though. Okay, and the whole point is to get a harder, stronger, more durable metal. Steel is should be the steel is pretty darn tough. Um, but then you come into the Iron Age, and the Iron Age is like iron, right? Which is let me find what the this is me researching right now live. Yeah. So okay. So iron is it's made up of. Don't give me that information. I don't want that information. Hmm. Oh, so iron goes into steel as well. Okay, so that's why. You have the cast iron and different kinds, and it's melting. So it goes the process of smelting, and it's heating the ore in a furnace and reducing the agents such as carbon, and to remove the oxygen and the impurities, and you get this really strong metal, right? You get this iron. Now, just to verify my knowledge, copper is I guess there are copper ores. I thought it was. Thought it was. Oh, no, I'm thinking of bronze. That's why I'm thinking wrong. It's copper. Yeah. So I'm right. Okay. So bronze is made up of copper and tin. Tin, not nickel. My bad. Um, which copper is actually quite valuable right now. You know, people are jacking it from all kinds of stuff. But it is a softer and less durable metal than iron, and then we go into steel and stuff like that. So you see where the power is going differently, and then maybe now it's not even metals; it's like lasers. But okay, so then we go from the Iron Age advancements. We're still in the Iron Age areas in this time period. The Aegean civilizations are happening, like the Minoans and the Mycenaeans. They were experiencing all kinds of prosperity and culture development, and later the Bronze Age would collapse, and then they would bye bye. Then you have what is really cool. What I think a lot of people, when they read the Bible, they don't, or a lot of people who study the Middle East, they forget to tend to remember that there were other parts of the world developing just as amazing because there was trade going on, and that's the Chinese area with Shang and Zhao dynasties, right? They were just crushing it. And we all have seen those Chinese movies where these armies are built out with super armor and spears and stuff like that. And I would love to see the Shang dynasty fight the Egyptians. You know what I mean? That would be dope. Or even the Romans would be cool. Their civilizations were so advanced. Today we're still trying to figure out how they created some of the things that they created. We think we're smart. I honestly believe we just got dumber because we got lazier and less cooperative to work together. Back in the days that we worked together far more than we work together today. And now we just let electronics and machinery do all the work, and we as a people get more divisive. Own personal thought. Okay. Now, what did they wear? That's a very important thing for how I'm going to create Ehud and how I develop him. He is going to be wearing something like tunics, right? The ketonic, which is for both men and women. They wear these tunics that are made of wool and linen, and they're about ankle length, so they shut off around the ankle, and they have these belts that are around the waist, easy to take on and off. Probably, I don't know how mobile they could be with it running wise, but tunics were the thing. Robes, the simla, and I imagine them being roughly the same thing. A little bit longer, probably. Maybe finer materials, silks, and stuff like this. Decorated embroidery. They had head coverings. Men often wore head coverings such as turbans and caps, which they still often practice today, which you can go to the Middle East and see something like going back into the, 1300 BCE and still be. That's kind of cool that you can just travel back in time if you just travel the world, because some places actually uphold the culture that old. Where they wear veils and shawls and stuff on their heads. Sandals were a big thing. Obviously, they didn't have Nike. They didn't have Adidas. And there goes my battery. And we should be back on in 1 second. Sorry, let me put the new battery in. 3, 2, 1. Give me my. There we are. Hello. That means I am going way too long explaining the process of research. So we're going to hurry up and get through this. Okay. So I have to research the sandals. What kind of sandals did they wear? What were they made up of? They were leather usually, and woven with some different types of material that were strong. Maybe they broke apart a lot, but I need to learn the straps. Jewelry, lots of jewelry, gold, silver, and other precious metals and stones. Outer garments for colder stuff were probably heavier cloaks made of like kind of wools and stuff like this, right? And then the colored patterns, which is really important too. Even though my comic's going to be black and white specifically, I need to show the patterns and even the differences in the designs. So I got to study that too. Okay, now let's move along. So in the story, we already have a lot to start researching. Clothing, the other religious figures and gods in the area, other cultures that are growing and dying out in that time period that would have an effect on Ehud and the Israelites and King Moab and the Moabites, right? The Phoenicians, the Syrians, the Amalekites. It says here the Amalekites and Ammonites. I got to study those cats because why did he gather them up? Were they good fighters? Were they good at something? What is the city of palms? City of palms, like, okay, so it must be that by the water, maybe. Or maybe it's not by the water. Maybe it's in the middle of the desert and just had a lot of palm trees. I don't know. I'm going to find that out. And for 18 years. Why 18 years? Obviously because Ehud stopped it at the 18-year mark. But in that 18 years, what was happening? How did it change in the oppression of the Israelites? The people of Israel cried out to the Lord. What does a cry out look like? And no one ever seems to answer this in the Bible. I don't understand. Where they all got on their knees at the same exact time during the daytime and go, God, help us. Or was it this long period of just death that was the cry itself? Okay. So then we have Ehud. I have to develop the most important part of the story, which is Ehud himself, the son of Gera, the Benjaminite. Who is Gera? Is he explained in the rest of the Bible? Doesn't look like it. But the author, obviously, let's see, right here, it says, the Benjaminites, who were they? Why was Gera so important to the Benjaminites? So I have to do a backstory on Gera and him having a son, Ehud, who may have displaced himself as either a very strong warrior with the left-handed or maybe even an outcast. Okay? But Ehud, right, obviously the Israelites and the Benjaminites had to give tribute, and tribute is like this big thing. If you ever imagine like Aladdin, he comes in and he gives all this gold and stuff to marry the daughter Jasmine. I imagine something like that. He had to go to the king of Moab, Eglon, and give all this glorious stuff to kind of appease him, right? And that was the trick. It's kind of like the Trojan horse. Ehud made himself a sword with 2 edges. Now that's you've got to think, why 2 edges, not 1? Well, possibly one would be much more visible to see, or maybe it wouldn't slide through the body if he knew he had to go through. Maybe whatever the reason is, he needed to make it 2-edged, and it had to be a cubit in length. And a cubit is 18 inches and 45 centimeters, or 4 or 5. 18 inches is 45 centimeters. 18 inches. That's this is about a foot. So imagine going 18 inches. 18 inches is no joke. Where are you going to hide that? I don't know. On his right thigh? What? My right thigh is hardly 18 inches by itself. So to pull that out of his right thigh, possibly the blade's going to be hanging upside down. Because if it was hanging upwards, where you pull it from your thigh going up into the air, it's too noticeable. But if you're left-handed and you're coming in towards your knee and you grab the left side of your knee on your thigh and you pull it downwards, you probably can pull that sucker out, right? So these are things to think about when you're creating your character. Um, so he says he bound it to his right thigh under his clothes. There's a lot here, a lot we're going to get into, but this is just day one. This is just day one, and you've got to think about all this. We'll go into the rest of it in the next tomorrow's podcast, because I haven't even got into. Where's my bookmarker? You guys don't even know. I haven't even got into Egypt, and Egypt's a big part of this story. You can see here, the Hyksos, 15th dynasty. It goes through, and then you have the New Kingdom, Egyptian empire with the Nubian, Palestine, and Syria coming through in this time period where Ehud is important. And then we have some other stuff that I want to talk about with the apologetics of the story. And you have the beginning of Chinese civilization all the way through. I mean, it's not the beginning, but man, look how much is being developed here, and the wars they're having in the fights, and oh my gosh, so much is happening in the world at this time period. You can see why the story of Ehud could have a lot of influence from the rest of the world. And this is a really cool book I have. It's called The Complete History of the World by Richard Overy. Anywho, as we draw and as I continue to create the story for Ehud and this comic book, today's main goal isn't for you to look at me drawing. I'm sorry, that's just not the way it's going to be. It's all research. You need to find a couple different books. You need to find everything you can on the internet. You can find everything. One of the biggest assets, though, honestly, is go to the museum. Go to the museum and see and visibly with your eyes see what that stuff looked like back in the day. My biggest lesson was traveling over to Israel in that area and seeing the landscape and seeing the mountains and seeing how easy it was for someone to do these things and fight these wars. Like, how far did they have to travel? Israel's not that big, so it's very possible that they did a lot of these things. But if I'm going to create a comic book that changes culture in a way that people look at it and go, this isn't just a fun superhero comic book, but it's something that tells a story that could be historically more accurate than the rest, as well as develop concepts and understanding of culture that could be influential, such as I would like to take Ehud and create him to be, a gay guy who is, because it's kind of like a left-handed person is the opposite of the right-handed norm, and I feel like that kind of outcast him as a kid, right? Like I said before, the religions and cultures didn't fancy so much the right-handedness, but I also wonder if because Moab King Eglon invited him into his chambers secretly, onto his rooftop in the cool, there was something more promiscuous there, right? Because it doesn't really say anything about it, but there's kind of this hint that there, a man who is gluttonous and kind of just a secret isn't enough for a king to shut the doors and lock it up. There would have to be some other benefit. And I think it's a physical benefit. And I think no better person than a person who's been outcast by his own people to create a double-edged sword, and also be promiscuous, to use that for his advantage to get Israel out, and then also change his fortune and his reputation, which might have been bad. So I get that opportunity to kind of explore that. And I think on a religious aspect of the Bible, they probably, no, you can't make it that way. Yeah, this is where, unless you've got proof of that, him being a straight dude, I'm not going to run down that road. I'm actually going to enjoy telling a story from someone who is conflicted with culture in that day, which was very probably aggressive to anyone who was, I don't know if it was too promiscuous, because Sodom and Gomorrah was known for being man and man and women and stuff like that. So we have to kind of got to sift through it and see where I can create the story out of it. And that's where we're going to go. And 3 volumes, I get to really tell a lot. And this is day 1. So you're probably going to see a lot of research in the beginning, a lot of sketching in the middle, and then a lot of developing the story arc and the writing throughout the third part of maybe the next month or so. And then we'll finally get to it. It's not going to be an easy process where I create a comic book in just a couple days. We're not going to do that. I'm going to create something I'm proud of myself, and something that Image Comics will be like, oh my gosh, this is epic. This isn't some, hand-me-down comic that someone just created in their garage overnight. This is something somebody put a lot of information and time into. And hopefully, if that doesn't work out, it's okay. It's A-okay. I've got Kickstarter that I can do, and people can support me that way, building it out, and I can get a couple comics out that way, and I can actually get publishers to pick it up. Shouldn't be a problem. So, if you're creating a comic book, and this is what you've been listening to, hopefully you got a little bit of a Bible study out of this, but mainly you've been encouraged to go, okay, there's a lot for me to learn and study to improve both my knowledge, but also to develop my characters the best way possible. Because if you just start creating your characters off of the top of your head and saying, oh, I want him to be a really cool double-bladed ninja who goes and kills bad monkey kings or something like that, okay, but then what's his dilemma? Where's his depth? We love Wolverine. We love these characters because they have depth to them. Batman has so much depth to him because he's not just a rich billionaire playboy. He is a guy who's troubled, so troubled he can't have a serious relationship without someone dying in it, right? His worst enemy is a guy he can't even kill or keep into the Arkham Asylum because he has some twisted, weird thing that he needs an enemy to keep him valid in the society of Gotham. All these little things matter. And for me to create Ehud with just saying, oh, he goes and does this thing, one simple comic book, blah, 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 kills a king, game over, would be doing injustice to Ehud. And if he was a real person who lived, then he had to have sweated, cried, stumped his toe, had a favorite food that he enjoyed, had a girl or guy he liked, been bullied possibly, or maybe he was such a bad to the bone fighter, no one wanted to mess with him, but then he had to go through the idea of like, how do I make friends if everyone's afraid of me? And then the oppression by Eglon, how did that affect him? So there's these things you have to think of, and we're going to go through it all. I'm not going to hold anything back. I know this is a long podcast and a long live stream, but the value in this I think will be great because you can always refer back to this if they keep it up and don't take it down for whatever reason. So I thank you for listening. Today was number 1, day 1, and I really appreciate you kind of going through this with me. And if you have more information about it, help me out as an artist. Give me information. Send me links, and I'll do the same for you. But I thank you guys. You guys are all amazing creatives. So go out there and create because that's what you're meant to do. And I'll see you guys Monday, for the weekend is my weekend. Bye, guys.